up short today. Feels like I fell 1,000 times. Nothing but doubt to flood my mind. 'Cause sometimes it's hard to remember why I ever started racing with my dreams. A restless December, feeling I was meant for more than I believed. I'll never surrender, rather try and fail and fall 1,000,000 times. I'm on my way. I'm on my way. I know as close as I am now, I will struggle, I will shout.
Hello friends, welcome back to Hyper Games. My name is Joseph and we're back here with another stream on the channel. Unusual time for the channel. Like I usually do streams Fridays and Saturdays at night, but there's a holiday here, so I thought it would be cool to jump into some of the reviews that they're gonna open in about 2 minutes. I'm gonna be reacting here to the Kinda Funny Games cast, at least the first few minutes, and then jumping into the Open Critic and see what are the scores, what are the positive reviews, the negative reviews, what do they say. Of course, the huge challenge for Ragnarok is gonna be well, it's a sequel, and we already saw some of the things that made 2018 great. And it's a challenge to manage a sequel and make it feel fresh without and at the same time like people want more of that God of War 2018. So how do you make it like fresh without feeling samey? That's the challenge of Santa Monica in this game, and that's what we're gonna see with the reviews. Okay, so we're waiting for Kinda Funny Games here. They should start at soon. Give me 1 second here. I'm also gonna be jumping later today to finish God of War 3, and then should start God of War 2018 tomorrow and finish it during this weekend and be ready for Ragnarok next week. Okay, so while we wait for Kinda Funny, let's see if there's something on the Open Critic here. Okay, it opens in 50 seconds.
Adeoye Jr.
Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Bless. Joining us as well is
Okay, here we are with Kinda Funny. Let's react to at least the overall thoughts for each of them, and then we jump into some of the reviews on Open Critic.
This is the first time I've ever been the same height as Greg.
Okay, there we go. We have 10 reviews so far. Gaming Nexus is giving a 10 out of 10. PlayStation Universe a 10 out of 10. To Infinite 5 out of 5. Gaming Ball 10 out of 10. Serious Gaming 10 out of 10. IGN Korea at 6 out of 10.
Nitro Rifle from Twitch.tv.
GamePro 10 out of 10. Console Creatures recommended.
Great.
It is a great morning, everybody, because today Ragnarok is upon us. Of course, we got our copy provided by
Okay, we're gonna jump into some of this later. Let's see what these guys have to say.
Ragnarok, enough copies that all 4 of us were able to beat this game, and now we're going to review this game for all of you. And that's going to be fun. We're all going to have a great time doing that. Normally, we do Kinda Funny Games daily during this time, live on twitch.tv/KindaFunnyGames and youtube.com/KindaFunnyGames. But this is such a big deal, Greg. We decided that we're going to get together 9 a.m. at embargo time of God of War Ragnarok, reviews dropping, and we're going to do it live, baby.
Do it live. We're doing it live.
We're not even going to get into all the rigmarole and stuff yet. I want to get straight into it. What did we think of God of War Ragnarok? Blessing, I want to start with you.
Okay, it's up 93.
Scale of 1 to 5.
On the kind of funny scale, I am giving it a 5 out of 5, which is our highest score that we can give.
Wow.
It is excellent. For me, the thing that sticks out the most, and this isn't a surprise for anybody if you like God of War, since this was a God of War 2018, the story, I think, really carries this game and really makes this game a special video game. I think for me going into this game, the biggest hurdle that it had was living up to
Like one
God
of the
War
things I
2018.
care most is
Because
about
God
the
of War
story.
2018 came through and rang the alarm, right? Like it alerted all of us to like, oh shit, you know, Sony Santa Monica has the stuff, right? And I think for me at least, the thing that game did excellently was, hey, it is a redefined Kratos. It is a new kind of God of War from the ground up. It is introducing the character of Atreus, and it is a different combat system than what we've seen from God of War, right? It's a bit more akin
Yeah, it was kind of
like,
hard
From
to get into
Software
the
behind
combat
back,
system
a
at
bit more
first. I'll
methodical
say
type of
that.
combat.
Read your enemy, use your weapons effectively.
Like be more careful, you know, counter parry, do all that good stuff. God of War Ragnarok, I don't think goes the direction of, hey, it's Last is Part 2, and it is a different game. It is next gen. It is a step up, right? God of War Ragnarok feels like when first picking it up, it feels like I'm picking up God of War 2018 back up again,
Sure.
and just continuing from where I left off.
Sure.
And that was actually a refreshing and I think good thing for this game because it makes it feel cohesive, right? It makes it feel like I'm continuing the same story, and the places that this story goes are places that you would never expect, right? And I don't want to say too much because I know you guys got stuff to say, but like I am very impressed and very blown away by the story.
It seems it's gonna be like a
Yeah,
huge
God of War
moments in the
Ragnarok's a
game
5
and
out
all
of
that.
5.
That's
It's
what
an
carries it
amazing
on
game.
top of like
It's
like
one
the
of those where
gameplay
you
that we
can
already
say
know from
2 ways after
2018.
that of like, I don't feel like that's a surprises anybody, and then also it's a huge surprise because how do you follow up something like God of War 2018, and how do you iterate on something that was so successful, make it feel fresh, make it feel new, but also make it feel familiar and make it feel like you are hanging out with old friends and like you're getting into something you already know. Sony Santa Monica does it flawlessly. This is a fantastic game. It is a masterpiece, but I think even saying all that, the thing that caught me the most off guard is that for my money, and I got a lot of money, now I got a lot of opinions on video games, right? But for my money, this solidifies Kratos as the best character in video games. Like the best character we've ever seen in video games. Like the journey, obviously, of all the God of War games before 2018 set up a very specific Kratos. 2018 arrived and introduced Daddy Kratos, Sad Dad Kratos, and we saw him go from being a hardened shell of a man right there to being a little bit more open with Atreus at the end. And what we talked about in our PS I Love You preview, right, Bless, was the fact that this game picks up and it doesn't pick up where we immediately left off, right? Time has passed, Atreus is older, life has gone on for these two. But it does pick up with the seed that was planted of Kratos being a better father, being a more open father to Atreus, has grown into a tree. That has happened. That has continued to go on. They are a different dynamic. They are a different group. They are a different duo, and that continues to build so incredibly well in this game, Tim. Where I cried in the beginning for a very specific thing that only Greg would probably cry about, right? But at the end, like, there is a moment in this game that we talk about video games as art all the time. And I feel like when we talk about, for the longest time, when you talk about video games as art, you would go, oh, well, Journey did this and made me feel that. Or there's this indie game like Florence or something like that. And obviously...
Divorced dad.
Yeah, exactly. They're doing something very specific with it, right? And there is a cutscene at the near the end of this game, right? Pretty much the night before anything would ever happen, right? That is so incredibly well done, both from the performance of Christopher Judge, from the animation Sony Santa Monica did with his face, to the writing. It's like, it's the visuals too. It's like, this is like the thing I would go show somebody who's like, oh, well, what are video games? And you're like, this is what they can be. And that's, of course, no disrespect to the gameplay that surrounds it. That is familiar, but is still as engaging as ever, and does find ways to be new, does find ways to innovate on things we already know. I'm flabbergasted that they pulled this off. You know what I mean? There was every opportunity to not even fuck it up, right? But have something that was Horizon Forbidden West, a game we all loved for the most part. I think I'm speaking for everybody. A game we all loved, but was
like 2 out of 5.
Yeah, you were really not.
Didn't like it.
There was more Horizon, and it was
Not
like,
a 2 out of 5.
I want more
Come
Horizon,
on.
that's fine. But it didn't feel like, oh my god, this is different. We've taken Aloy. Like God of War Ragnarok is an incredibly special game.
Andy Courts has.
Yeah, 5 out of 5, man.
Flabbergasted.
This game is wonderful.
Flabbergasted.
It really it really reminds me of going to the theater the night of Avengers Endgame and wondering how are they going to follow up the first part of this. Can it be
Oh
better?
my god,
And I
that's
think watching a preview from a friend of ours, Skill Up, and him mentioning
that's a
that
high. Like
you're kind of
I remember
immediately-
that like
you
watching
immediately
that
forget
movie.
the idea of can this be better than 2018? You kind of just throw that thought out of the window because you're just enjoying the game so much. And I think the performances are just out of this world. The combat is a lot more fun, and they find ways to keep things fresh without making it feel like you are getting repetitive in any way. I think I don't think it's I don't think it's a perfect game. I still think that like for whatever reason,
Does a perfect game exist?
I'm talking about
Hyper Light
Tetris
Drifter, yeah.
inside.
I think
Elden Ring.
I think there are some like pacing issues near the end, and it could just be because I main pathed it or whatever. But I still think that like it delivers on every front that you'd want. This game is absolutely amazing. 5 out of 5. Must buy, absolutely.
One thing I want to bring up, right, regarding one of the main points that I think does make this game stand out compared to God of War 2018 is the scope of the story, right? Because, like, you know, God of War 2018 was very much focused on Kratos and Atreus and their relationship, and it had a very focused goal, right? It is us going up a mountain to spread Atreus's mother's ashes, right? And everything that happens in the story happens kind of around that one specific goal. God of War Ragnarok, I think, takes what 2018 sets up and turns it from this focused story into an epic and succeeds at it in a way that I could never expected, right? There's like a moment later on into the game where I had similar feelings of how I felt watching the Harry Potter movies as a kid, where I'm like, wow, this world can be this expansive, and like, wow, there's so much mystery and so much potential here, right? There are places they go that made me think about Norse mythology, and I probably could say this about 2018 too, but I think this one doubles down on it and takes it way further. The way I'm thinking about
Yeah,
this,
the thing about
Norse
2018 is
world
that there
in this
like
game,
there
I'm
were
like, yo,
realms you
I
can't
want, like,
visit, and now you can
sequels,
visit
3
all of them.
spin-offs of this thing. Like, they really blew it wide open, and it feels like God of War 2018 being God of War 1 in this scenario, right? This feels like playing God of War 2 and 3, just in terms of where they take it, in terms of the length of it, how jam-packed it is. Like, one thing we haven't mentioned yet is that this game is probably nearly twice as large as the original, like twice as long.
It's beefy.
Yeah, by the time we finished
Yeah,
the
that's
game, I
what
was like, dude,
that's what
I
what's
can't believe this is still going. And I think that kind of
some guys from IGN said from IGN Beyond said like
I agree with that
it
quite
takes
a bit.
around 7.
But
They are
the
at
fact that
70
there's
hours
so much
trying
in
to
here,
complete
and it was so
100% of the
quality,
game.
and there's so much dialogue and good contextual dialogue, and like there's so much just world building stuff that is going to make you fascinated with this world. That's the stuff that really blew me away with this as a sequel.
Timothy, what did you think?
You know, there was Infinity War, then there's Endgame, there's Last of Us, then Last of Us Part 2, and in this case, there is God of War 2018 and then God of War Ragnarok.
Oh,
This
yeah,
is
so
a
it's
5 out of 5.
it's
This is
huge. Definitely.
undeniably as good as its predecessor, debatably better, and I do think that it's what day is it? What are you actually talking about? The
That's going to
gameplay
be
here, the
as
story there.
recency bias aside and stuff like that. It'll be interesting as we get deeper into conversations about God of War throughout our lifetime to see where we come down on that.
I think that for like all the properties that I just named, there is it is subjective to. I feel like at some point it's subjective in terms of the polish, in terms of like the accomplishments, in terms of the technical aspects XYZ. But then there is the subjective. Well, I prefer this character and they were better in this game
100%.
or whatever it is. That stuff. So you can kind of fall there. So for me personally, I fall on the sequel to all three of those. I'm an Endgame person, I am a Last of Us 2 person, and I am a God of War Ragnarok person. I was enthralled every single moment that I was playing through this game. I did way more side stuff than you guys did.
Yeah, you beat it, right?
I did beat it. I did beat it.
What are your hour? What's your hour count on your save?
So my hour count is 35 hours.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which
Wow.
is a lot. And I kept talking to them like throughout. I was like, I'm at this many hours. Like, how much more to the game? They're like, you have a lot more game. And then I realized like, oh, I'm doing side stuff. But I was doing side stuff, not realizing that it was side stuff
It all
because it
feels
was
so good.
so good. It felt so important, and I was like, I don't want to miss this. And I know I can go back, but it feels so perfectly ingrained and intertwined with the story that they're telling. And the story they're telling is. Bless was saying this. It is so much bigger than I ever would have expected. We get teased with. We get pure North stuff, right, in the first one. But then we get teased with the stuff we actually care about, the stuff that we actually know and all this stuff. And I think that this game is coming out at the perfect time of being able to play with the mainstream's kind of understanding of things. Like, we just had a movie with Ragnarok in the title 4 years ago, right? We know what Ragnarok is. So, like, seeing them deal with that, it's cool because I feel like there's a level of familiarity that I wouldn't have when they're just talking about, like, some of these gods and some of these characters. And I feel like it's great to, like, be familiar, but this game is the king of subverting expectations in ways of characters. You hear their name, you're like, I know what they're gonna do, and then they do something different, and you're like, that's weird, but it totally feels earned. It totally feels like you guys have built this world that, despite being so different than what I expected to be, it feels absolutely right.
Every single thing that they set up narratively has unexpected but satisfying payoff.
Yeah.
Like, every single time I'm like, I did not see that coming, and that was really cool the way you twisted that. And I had that over and over and over again.
And it really feels like, I think that the put it on the box quote for me is like, it felt like they held nothing back. Like, they were just like, is there a cool thing we could do for this? It doesn't feel like, oh, this is part 2 of a trilogy.
So this is indeed gonna be like God of War 2 and 3
definitely want a
together,
sequel.
if
I
we
hope that
take
we
it
get
the
a sequel.
comparison with the
I'm sure we'll
original
get a sequel.
trilogy.
But like, this really feels, they're like, no, we got to go all out for this. Like, whatever we can do, we should do, if it makes sense. And luckily enough, it all made sense. I just spent all that time talking about just the story. That's how into just the story I am. I don't know if a game's ever played better than this. It's just so damn fun to play.
Yeah.
Is it absolutely perfect? No. I have nitpicks here and there. I think the menus are a little over-designed.
The
and
map. Tell me
convoluted,
about the
but
map.
that's where I'm
They
at with this
fixed the
game.
map.
I mean,
That was one of my main
gear
complaints
and,
of the
relics and all the
original
stuff. I
Ragnarok.
found it overwhelming, right? Because it was just like, oh my gosh, there's so much here, but I'm just trying to do this, but I come back into there, and like eventually you get your head wrapped around like any other game. But it is like, when you go into that menu, it is a menu. There is a lot going on in there, and you have to go through it and figure out what that means to you.
Yeah. So before we get into even more in-depth thoughts with everything, I do want to
Spoiler-free.
get through. Yeah, spoiler-free. I do want to get through the rigmarole of the show. Of course, this is the
Okay,
kind of
we're gonna stop here. Great review, guys. Let's jump into OpenCritic then. And I forgot to pull. Let me open it. I forgot to pull the original game. Okay, this is not gonna be an app comparison because like it's a 94 but with 250 critic reviews, and it's obviously not gonna have 250 reviews today. Okay, let's refresh this. So we have a 94. It's kind of the same. But we are at 90 reviews so far. So it's not exactly the same, but it has the same score. Okay, let's see if there's something else. IGN gave it a 10 out of 10, Eurogamer recommended, Games Radar 4.5 out of 5, Easy Allies 9 out of 10, Metro Game Central 8 out of 10, Game Informer 9.5 out of 10, GameSpot 9, and Game Revolution 9 out of 10. Now I asked here on the channel, like, what were your thoughts on... What were your thoughts on how it was gonna score? And like, yes, I had the whole spectrum of scores. That means that I asked if it was gonna be 75 or below, which 2% of you guys said it was. It's your opinion. 76 to 80, 0%. 81 to 85, 4%. 86 to 90, 12%. And 91 or above, 82%. So most of you guys got it correct. I have the whole spectrum for all the games that I asked this question every time that I did it for Horizon and also for Stray. So yeah, 94. Most of you guys got it correct. So like, I mean, we kind of expected this. Let's jump into some reviews here. Let's jump into IGN's review. Where is it? Okay, here we go. A whole lot to load. What's going on with IGN? Tamur Hussein did the review for GameSpot. It seems like IGN website went down with this review. Let's check Tamur's review. Sony Santa Monica brings back what made the original God of War reboot great and delivers another fantastic story with exceptional writing. By Tamur Hussein. Okay, so let's see. God of War Ragnarok is a lavish production with pristine visuals, jaw-dropping scale, crunchy combat that is as satisfying as it is brutal, and a world that begs to have its every corner and crevice explored. It's a spectacular blockbuster, but these are the least of its achievements. Whoa, wow. In a game where a hulking god rips all manner of creatures limb from limb, the most shocking moments are not bathed in blood, but carried by poignant words and heartfelt emotions. They are a former God of War known for merciless killing is in his king finding. Wait. They are a former God of War known for mercilessly killing his kin, finding the words to empathize with loss, a despondent child imploring a father to break a self-destructive cycle, a moment of tenderness in the life of a boy that has the weight of the world on his shoulders. God of War Ragnarok's most impressive achievements are its exploration of loss and love, grief and growth, determinism and defiance. It's an astoundingly well-written game that deconstructs the mythology of Norse gods and rebuilds it as an odyssey about families. Its story is not about the end of the world, but those that have a hand in it. They are revered as mythical gods, but are characterized by deep flaws, twisted by skewed perspectives, and corrupted by questionable motivations in the same way the people they preside over are. And yet some also have redemptive qualities. In that respect, Ragnarok's story is told from a gray area where nuances blur the line between heroes and villains, good and evil. By constantly challenging you to reconsider who they are and the factors that drive their actions, these characters remain compelling throughout. There are moments when characters you are not supposed to be rooting for reveal the trials and tribulations that have shaped them, or the demons they battle. This alone is enough to humanize them, but Ragnarok also mirrors the struggles of the protagonist in the antagonist, forcing you to ask for yourself if I'm willing to empathize with the good guys because of what they are going through. Shouldn't I do the same for the bad guys? The answer, it turns out, it's very complicated, and that's what makes lost the It's very complicated, and that's what makes the story so captivating. Although Kratos and Atreus are the stars of the show, almost every character is in the midst of their own complicated journey. For some, it's one that will lead them from a pit of despair, or pull them from darkness and onto a brighter path. For others, it's the one that fuels obsession that could be the undoing of everything and everyone. This is best illustrated by Kratos and Atreus, who, by killing Baldur at the end of the last game, act as the harbingers of the end of times. The consequences of this moment weigh differently on them, and what they feel is their responsibility because their actions pull them in different directions. Kratos, who has finally learned to guide his son, through love instead of fear, focuses on steering him away from conflict and the affairs of the Aesir gods, but does so with the knowledge that his son is prophesied to play a part in the Ragnarok and he is destined to die. Like, this is one of the things that it's very exciting of this game. Now Kratos, after he brought the end to like the previous saga and all the gods there, like, he has the knowledge and he has to guide Atreus differently. Atreus, meanwhile, is compelled to prevent Ragnarok and find out who he is as Loki, the name he was given by the giants, and sets off to find there the Norse god of war to achieve his goal. This complicated dynamic serves as the conflict between them, a man that wants to avoid war at all costs, having learned the toll it strikes firsthand, versus a boy who believes war is the only way to unseat power that has ruined the lives of so many. Those who remember Atreus' power-tripping fledgling god phase from the last game will also remember how frustrating it was to go through that. There's nothing more annoying than an arrogant child, but Ragnarok treats the differences in perspective between father and son in a much different way. Kratos is now reckoning with letting his son forge his own path and learning that holding on too tight could push him away. Atreus has matured since we last saw him and is now more cognizant that his action can and will have consequences. As a result, the dynamic has shifted to where Kratos is trying to learn about his son instead of defining him, while Atreus does his best to see things from his father's perspective. And in both cases, Mimir's consoles play a major part in this. The fruits of the journey that both characters underwent in the previous game are carried forward into this sequel, and thanks to the superb writing and acting, the back and forth between them are genuinely interesting. There's a newfound sense of mutual respect in these conversations, which is uncharted territory for Kratos, and in turn fits into the motive of growth that underpins God of War Ragnarok. Okay, so it's gonna be like a mature relationship between both father and son. This is a game where you will see people change in meaningful ways without revealing details, new characters, and those you became intimately familiar with in the previous game have experiences that profoundly impact them and the people around them. God of War Ragnarok is rich in themes to unpack, from the influence of families and generational trauma to how abuses of power and emotional manipulation can change people. God of War Ragnarok places the Norse pantheon under the harshest of lights to show how deeply flawed they are, and we're able to explore that thoroughly through our own experiences with them, as well as tales told by others that have their own. Mimir, the self-processed smartest man alive, returns to offer his insight on all things Norse history, and as do the various writings scattered throughout the realms that recount complex histories, the tales of notable figures, or provide insight into the thoughts and feelings of various characters. Like, one of the things that I was surprised about the first game is that in the first fight with Baldur, you throw at him this huge rock that has like the writing of what's gonna happen in the whole game. So we're gonna have to be very we're gonna have to check everything around this time. God of War is a long game, but at every step of the journey, the writing and characterization make it count. It justifies that runtime by cultivating an intimacy with the characters that is only possible by spending hours and hours with them, learning how they see the world and what influences their thinking. And pretty much every character is fascinating, but especially the Aesir gods, who can be a cruel bunch at the best of times. With the looming threat of their demise, however, each of them begins to unravel in different ways. For some, their nature becomes concentrated further, which has unfortunate repercussions. Others, however, are forced to rethink what truly matters to them. There have been a lot of takes on Norse mythology, but God of War Ragnarok is easily one of the most memorable. It's elevated by the presence of Kratos, whose past life as a Greek god provides him with a unique perspective, but also because he's placed at the center of it. The legends that were used to are molded around him and his son, and they adhere in a way that is truly impressive. When all is said and done, you can stand back and marvel at how neatly and creatively different strands of narratives and characterization from older God of War titles, the previous entry in this rebooted series, and Norse mythology as a whole have been weaved together. When it comes to confronting Kratos and Atreus' enemies on the battlefield, God of War Ragnarok doesn't make any drastic departures from the previous game, though there are some new additions and expansions made to key mechanics, so the combat is mostly the same. Fundamentally, however, the core gameplay remains the same, and this is in its favor. My familiarity with the previous game meant it was very easy to begin tearing my way through the battlefield, and the close camera angle offers a dramatic front row seat to the brutality Kratos' legendary reputation is built upon. There's a maniacal kind of glee that comes from stomping grounds around arenas, swinging the trusty Leviathan axe to cleave draugrs, elves, dragons, demons, and all manner of other fantastic creatures, one of the obviously the key point is that there's a wide variety of enemies in this game, instead of just like the same trolls that you fought that were like different colors. Even all these hours later, the thrill of hurling the axe into the distance and then recalling it back to your side has not diminished one bit, and with new skill trees to work through, this ability continues to provide ample opportunities to create flashy combos that hit hard. This time around, Kratos also has access to the Blades of Chaos from the outset, and Sony Santa Monica has put them to great use, as well as serving as excellent crowd control tools to dishing out extra damage to ice-aligned creatures. The Fiery Blades are also used to emphasize mobility and verticality. Kratos can latch onto enemies and close the distance with them, which means they are very handy for target prioritization and even escape tactics. That's what we saw in the Game Informer preview, but they are also essential for quickly ascending to elevated platforms, where enemies often position themselves to take potshots. This means you will need to have a much keener awareness of your surroundings and ensure these threats are addressed quickly. A small but very welcome addition is the ability to launch off elevated areas and execute plunging attacks on those below, which ensures that the sense of momentum that is built in skirmishes is not lost when moving around the battlefield. My favorite weapon remains Kratos' trusty fist, which hit like boulders and generate a significant amount of stun. Like the previous game, enemies have a stun meter, which when filled opens them up to devastating cinematic finishers that are weapon specific and usually involve rending something in two, crushing bones, or eviscerating the enemy entirely. It's a wince-inducing kind of viciousness that really drives home the power of fantasy of being a god, which is ironic considering that Kratos in God of War Ragnarok is a much more balanced and, I dare say, emotionally stable person. The contrast actually ends up working for the game, as it becomes a stark reminder of how Kratos has come to be able to cage that kind of beast within him. Another area that has been expanded is shields. You were previously limited to just one, but in Ragnarok Kratos has access to a wider range of shields. Each one usually has a playstyle it caters to, so for those who want to focus on pairing attacks to create openings, there are a selection that will enable that. But if you are the kind of person that likes to tank damage, bigger and sturdier options are available. Shields also usually have a secondary function that is executed by tapping L1 twice to check an enemy and create a space, slam the shield into the ground to break guard, retaliate with a punch that knocks them back, or even rush forward. This new wrinkle further enhances the offensive feel of combat by letting you go from the back foot to the front in an instant. It's a smart little addition that means you can switch up your playstyle should you want to. Further enhancing what Kratos is capable of are the various role-playing systems that are tied to equipment. Naturally, equipment can be upgraded to improve their strength, their effectiveness of the element they are imbued with, or the power of the unique runic attacks, among other things. But the most tangible additions are often in the attachments, some of which will further enhance attributes, while others will go so far as to introduce new functionality, like sending consecutive waves of frost with every swing of the axe. That's what they were mentioning in the preview, like you can imbue like the weapon and do like more elemental attacks. Armor is treated similarly, bestowing pluses and minuses to attributes or having a unique effect that is activated by certain conditions. None of this is particularly game-changing or innovative, but it does offer the freedom to create a build for Kratos that caters to your playstyle. In my case, for example, I like to play extremely aggressively and adopt high-risk strategies where parrying comes before blocking and dodging. Because of this, I focus on acquiring and upgrading equipment that rewarded me for this aggression. My entire strategy was built around rushing in and punching enemies into submission until they become vulnerable to cinematic executions, which would in turn grant me a burst of health recovery. I combine this with a relic that creates a realm shift, effectively slowing down time and giving me another opportunity to unleash a flurry of strikes or the space to hunt down life-restoring gems that might be on the battlefield. Kratos' aggression is reflected in the enemies, which hit much harder than before and aim to overwhelm. In the early hours this is fine, but as the game ramps up and trickier enemies appear, the mechanics can struggle under the pressure of the increased speed and aggression. The enemies often absorb much more damage, have multiple phases, or move around and attack from a distance, and in many cases there can be multiple of them. Because of this, it can often feel like you're being pulled in multiple directions and cracks in defensive. Because of this, it can often feel like you are being pulled in multiple directions and cracks in the defensive options form. I often found myself in the middle of a series of attacks and then suddenly an enemy would appear from behind, forcing me to disengage either by turning around or rolling out of the way. The quick turn input is now L1 and down on the directional D-pad, and even as I approached the end of the game, it felt awkward and unreliable to execute, especially in the heat of battle. You can remap this, but I never found a place where I was completely comfortable with it. Okay, so this is one of the first things that is like a negative. They changed the input for the quick turn. This also felt like it was breaking the flow of combat, especially since the intensity made it easy to lose track of the on-screen arrow that indicates an attack from behind is coming. Well, that happened to me in 2018 as well. Like I would usually like lose like I wouldn't know where I was being attacked from sometimes. The indicator switches from yellow to red to provide some idea of timing, but I still found myself getting clipped a lot, so it's still something that happens. It's another negative here. Although this isn't a big deal for much of the game, in the latter half enemies can unstun lock you, so there were numerous occasions where a single enemy would open me up to being pummeled by multiple, and I would die in an instant. These moments arose in a way where I felt ill-equipped and incapable of making Kratos react in a way that could deal with what was being thrown at me, as opposed to not being able to execute because of my own skill. Since there are high-level challenges equivalent to Valkyries from the previous game, and more than a few that are even trickier, this is the kind of thing that can be a difference between life and death. Thankfully for boss fights at least, God of War Ragnarok is much better about checkpointing as you move through phases, and when you are getting stuck into the combat, Atreus is much more capable this time around. Along with Mimir, he will either do callouts to keep you informed, or fire off some arrows at your command, or of his own volition to get threats of you. He's a good lad. What a good boy. Ultimately, although these issues can be irksome, they are small and in the grand scheme of things don't drastically impact how the mechanics coalesce. Sorry if that's not how you pronounce that. Combat is much pacier and more dynamic than before, and it is thrilling regardless of whether you are fighting a smattering of Draugrs or trading blows with gods. It's thoughtfully designed and thoroughly satisfying from the first swing of the axe to the very last. Kratos and Atreus battle takes them through across all 9 realms, which is a change from the previous game where 2 of the realms were locked away. One of the most interesting parts of God of War Ragnarok is how it reimagines areas that were in the original game. Fimbulwinter is used as a narrative conceit to give these familiar locales new life. In Norse mythology, Fimbulwinter, which translates to the Long Winter, serves as a prelude to Ragnarok. In-game, it affects the 9 realms in a different way. Midgard, for example, is besieged by a bitter cold, so when you return to the Lake of the Nine once again, it has completely frozen over. Key areas of the lake that you may have become intimately familiar with in the last game may now be inaccessible as new parts of it open up. A cold wind sweeps across the icy surface of the lake, and at the center of it all, Tyr's temple is now barely recognizable under the buildup of snow. In the distance, icy mountain peaks serve as a backdrop to a single lightning strike, frozen in place as the marks of the as the mark of an intense battle. Naturally, navigation is completely changed since you can no longer sail the waters. Instead, Kratos and Atreus get around on a sled that is pulled by their trusty pet wolves, which is a nice way to mix up the way you get around. At certain points, you can even use their keen sense of awareness to sniff out objectives, which is a nice touch. Oh, nice. So they can smell like if there's something hidden or something like that and tell you for you to stop and then go and check something out. Battlefield by comparison look picturesque from the outskirts with its bright blue skies, but as you venture deeper into its wetlands it becomes more desert-like, with craggy rocks awkwardly jutting out and collapsed wooden mining equipment filling the spaces in between. There's an unpleasant arid atmosphere to it, and yet at the same time it's quite a visual spectacle to behold, rich in detail and intricate in its construction. Vanaheim, home of the Vanir, is a verdant forest that has reclaimed much of the landscape. That's something we saw in like the most recent trailer. Trees gently sway in the wind, moss has settled atop the water, and vegetation snakes along the stone floors and up onto man-made shrines. And if you take a moment to stop and look around, you'll find wildlife nestled amongst all the green. It's a place that is very alive, which makes it a nice contrast to the coldness of Midgard or the glistening majesty of Alfheim's architecture. There are other areas I won't spoil, some of which have a good amount of to see and do, while others serve a specific function. So I guess kind of like this realm where you had like the realm of the ashes on 2018. I guess that's what he meant by some serve a specific function. No one area in God of War Ragnarok comes across as big as the Lake of the Nine, but it seems like this is a symptom of how you are constantly moving around on around a variety of locations as opposed to repeatedly returning to one. Regardless, each realm has a grand sense of scale, and as you move between them, the scope of the world as a whole far eclipses what came before. While the main story campaign moves Kratos and Atreus through all 9 realms, there are plenty of side quests to undertake in each of these locations. Yet another testament to the writing is that these quests are never a distraction and always present a good reward. Whether that be an item or crafting materials at the very least. However, most of the time they also deliver some piece of lore, further flesh out a side character, or give Kratos, Atreus, and Mimir something new to bond over. Going anywhere with these characters is an exciting prospect, and I often found myself just wandering around to let conversations play out or hoping that new ones would start. Kind of like when Mimir would tell tales in 2018. In most cases they did, and I was treated to valuable character growth. In Ragnarok, Kratos is now more inquisitive, Mimir is always ready and willing to offer his insight, and Atreus takes the opportunity to make jokes at both their expense. And that's something I definitely didn't expect. God of War Ragnarok is a funny game. There are more than a few laugh out loud moments that endear me to this new family unit that developed over the last game and flourishes in its sequel. And that's what distinguishes God of War Ragnarok from its predecessor and most other action games. Despite being a story about warring gods at the end of the world, the soul of the game is something far more sentimental. You may have noticed that I avoided mentioning the names of the characters or describing plot beats, and that was intentional. To talk more about anything or anyone would be to rob you of some of the most unexpected things that God of War Ragnarok achieves with its narrative and the themes they explore. The last game's thoughtful approach to exploring fatherhood was unexpected. Ragnarok somehow manages to feel like an even more personal tale about the complicated nature of families and the people that make them up. For every moment of brutality, there's one of genuine and relatable emotion. How they land will vary from person to person, but there were multiple that left me with tears welling up. Oh boy. Like Sony and their games that make you cry. I can see if they like Greg mentioned it, and now Tamur as well. I think we're all gonna cry in this. If nothing else, God of War Ragnarok further cements Sony Santa Monica's narrative team as one of the best in the business. Okay, so a 9. The good, outstanding storytelling that interprets Norse myths in creative ways. Top-tier character work that makes every interaction compelling. Satisfying combat that challenges you but also makes you feel powerful. Stunning visuals and impressive scale. The bad combat can occasionally become a bit too busy and unmanageable due to readability. That was something that I read. I heard in the preview for Kinda Funny, like that Kinda Funny did, where they were mentioning that they were dying a lot. So it seems like it's mostly because it's harder because you have to deal with many enemies and it becomes hard to manage. We'll see. Tamur completed God of War Ragnarok on PS5 in 35 hours and has returned to the game for many hours more. Okay, so 35 hours. I think the original, well, you could beat it on like 20 hours. So it's a lot longer, at least for the main path. I don't know if he did like some side quests. It doesn't mention anything about that. Okay, let's see if the IGN. I'm gonna check like 5 reviews. I'm gonna pick 2 positives, one that is like in the middle ground, and a negative, or 2 negatives to see what they didn't like. Let's see if this updated here. Okay, we had 90 reviews when I checked this. We have 105 and it's a 94. Which is the same, but still wouldn't have the same amount of reviews to make like a fair comparison. Like it still lacks 145 more reviews in it, but still is pulling off the same score. Okay, let's see if IGN review went up. Okay, by Simon Cardi, God of War Ragnarok review. How did you follow up on one of the greatest video games of all time? Sony Santa Monica finds itself in a situation not dissimilar to when Francis Ford Coppola created the sequel to his mob movie masterpiece The Godfather. Like part 2 of the Corleone story, God of War Ragnarok puts a fierce younger member of the family directly under the microscope. In doing so, it manages to reach the heights of its predecessor and in some ways even tower above it. The writing, performances and music are each exceptional, bringing this expansive Norse tapestry to life. But even as it holds your heart in one hand with its elegantly told story, it's crunching bones in the other with fantastically ferocious combat. It all binds together to forge a monumental action epic that adds yet another impressive landmark to the video game landscape. Keeping things broad and spoiler-free, Kratos' story picks up a few years after the final revelations of 2018's God of War. This is absolutely not one of those sequels where everything will make sense without playing the first game, or at the very least watching the included story recap, which is probably too brief to serve as anything but a jolt to the memory. The apocalyptic Ragnarok is coming, and its events circle around his son Atreus like one of Odin's ravens. Fimbulwinter, a time of unrest that presages Ragnarok, has very much come, and during the intervening years Atreus has been growing stronger, learning about his giant named Loki, and trying to convince his father to trust him. There are touching callbacks to the haunting scene from the 2018 God of War as Kratos proudly watches Atreus prove that he is no longer a child, but this is no slow introduction. Ragnarok wastes no time in stepping into the action, and after a breakneck opening battle, the first step of this new journey is to leave the frozen realm of Midgard and find a missing Norse god in the broader and varied universe. It may not be as tightly told as a story as 2018's, but Ragnarok has much grander designs. This is a sprawling epic that always keeps things on the move without ever becoming disorientating, gluing me to the edge of my seat as it repeatedly toyed with expectation. It's an ambition regularly met by stunning execution, with a momentum that never slips you as you hurtle towards its bombastic ending. This journey took me just over 28 hours, with a few fair side quests completed along the way, but with plenty still left to do afterward. Okay, so even if you take a couple side quests, it takes, let's say that removing the side quest, it's probably, let's say, like, I don't know, 25 hours, 20. It's still a bit longer than the original. Prophecy and sacrifice swirls at the story's center as it repeatedly prods at the concept of destiny and whether blood runs thicker than the ink that pens it. It doesn't merely offer up surface level readings of these themes, instead each character and their motives are given the respect they deserve by delving in deep. It's a truly special and fittingly grand conclusion of Kratos' Norse saga, as well as providing resolution to some of his more troubled Greek memories. There are twists that are and turns aplenty, with fake-outs and misdirections woven into the story's fabric as it darts between loud spectacle and tender conversation. Characters old and new play their own crucial parts, including fresh characterizations of Norse behemoths like Thor and Odin, with a line of dialogue rarely wasted between them. These are truly unique depictions, and it's credit to Santa Monica and the actors playing each that I wasn't reminded once of their MCU equivalents. Despite being laden with myth and melodrama, there's still plenty of time for welcome pockets of self-aware silliness that almost always elicit a laugh, whether that be another bizarre dwarven contraption or the simple thrill of Kratos eating a sausage. When not eating dinner, Kratos' thunderous voice actor Christopher Judge frequently engages in a smartly realized dialogue with his equally impressive castmates. Make no mistake though, this is firmly Judge's court and one he frequently dominates. Kratos' traumatic personal history is reflected in everything from his mournful tone of voice to his appearance. His Icarus wings are long since clipped, but his complexion is still pale like a square of wall where family portrait used to hang. Death weighs heavy in the winds that guide him on every journey he takes, whether delivering it himself or searching for some closure. The everlasting cycle of violence between parents and their children has long been a theme ever since the original God of War trilogy, although one that was only truly emphasized in 2018's revival. Now it's an inescapable feature of Ragnarok and exploration of the rawest and most human emotions, and what happens when they are channeled through superhuman vessels. Pain leads to anger, anger leads to hate. This is the genesis of the stalking, that thread that embodies by the incomparable force that is a grieving mother. Portrayed incredibly with a newfound fury by Daniela Bisutti, Freya is a striking presence to be reckoned with in the sequel, and casts much darker shadow this time around. No longer just a helpful witch in the woods, she's given a whole new spectrum of emotional depth to play in. And Ragnarok is all the better for it. Each character is given their own moments to shine throughout. Sonny Soljic fires back regularly with the sharp teenage tongue of a brasher, more confident Atreus, and Alastair Duncan's severed head accessory Mimir continues to provide levity and exposition in abundance. Various newcomers to the vastly expanded cast that also deliver fantastic performances, with a particular standout being Laia de Leon Hayes, radiating infectious energy from the mysterious Angerboda. Brent Pendergast brings warmth to the nuanced tier. He is charmingly plucky as the Norse God of War. The foul-mouthed Brock and skittish Sindri continue to bring their unique brand of dwarven charm while granting you those all-important upgrades. They often provide pockets of humor as well as a lot of genuinely helpful info along the way, as they play a much more central role in the story this time around. Also returning is composer Bear McCreary, whose score, like the Dwarven Smith brothers, goes hammer and tongs from the first moment to the last. There's some truly beautiful music to be heard along the journey, as well as explosions of raw orchestral power during intense fight scenes. The artistry bursting from every seam is astonishing, even when running in the high frame rate favoring performance mode, with excellent costume and world designing on show. Ragnarok is incredibly well polished, with little details from the etchings on a dagger to the clunk of a cupboard door closing shown love. Expertly animated with saliva sputtering grimaces launching towards the lens during the heat of battle and hair flowing realistically on Kratos' less follically challenged enemies. And here we have like they also publish like every 10 they have given to IGN. So God of War Ragnarok joins 2018, and I think it joins 2018. And other games like, okay, so this goes back to like the very beginning of IGN. Layered writing, impeccable acting, and stunning set design are all crucial aspects in driving God of War filming aspirations home, but they are also never let down by the rock-solid technical craftsmanship at work. The one continuous camera shot style of 2018's reboot returns, snaking through the entirety of Ragnarok as if mimicking the world serpent Jormungandr himself. The technique may have lost a little of its initial wow factor 4 years on, but it's still a remarkably impressive achievement that has several new tricks to show off and only adds to Ragnarok's cinematic nature. A Song of Ice and Fire. God of War's combat has always been the flashy attraction that draws a crowd in to be wowed by its story, however, and Ragnarok continues that tradition. It may seem familiar at first, and indeed some of things remain the same, but it is not afraid to play with expectations and throw a curveball your way. Kratos' blade whip around in every direction, delivering a clanky fiery pain to any face they meet. Heavy cleaves of his axe crunch into enemies, making them fall like bloodied origami. And yes, that axe still slices through the air, immediately lodging itself into anything unfortunate enough to be in its path, before being recalled to your palm with a hearty kick from the DualSense controller's haptics in what remains one of the most satisfying button presses ever assigned to a controller. It's all unapologetically fast and undeniably glorious, harkening back to the brand of frantic action in which the series was originally rooted. There's a fair helping of excessive violence on show. That's one of the things that was like mentioned, that they are bringing a little bit more violence back, like from the first trilogy, with Kratos willfully impaling and ripping apart any enemy put in front of him. Arenas are often, and I think they also added blood. Like 2018 still has some very violent scenes, but like most of the enemies like disappear afterward or something like that. Arenas are often tight in tight spaces full of threats, and though you are not going to see the return of dozens of enemies on screen at once that spawn in wave after wave, that doesn't mean there aren't some aspects of those older games shining through. But even with that slight shift to old school action, Ragnarok's eyes are still drawn more to the shimmer of Nathan Drake's gold rather than Bayonetta's platinum. Cinematic spectacle takes precedence over the chaotic, bordering on cartoonish action of old. The axe feels largely familiar to how you remember, and that's no bad thing, with its dynamic mix of heavy attacks and range power, but how you wield the blades is noticeably different. There's a greater emphasis on using them to hook enemies and maneuver them around the arena, whether that be dragging them towards you or juggling them in the air like the hottest of potatoes. They are much closer to how they felt in the original games, a nostalgic moveset with a brilliant modern age. The action feels and looks outstanding, and there's no caveats or exceptions when I say that Ragnarok is only an improvement over God of War's already ferocious combat. Both weapons have new tricks to show off too. You can Frost Awaken the axe by holding the triangle button to power up your next attack, or mash the same button while the blades are equipped to ignite them. Locking down an enemy by freezing them with the axe before switching to the blades to unleash pain on their friends is an endless source of enjoyment. Given the shield is now more of an offensive tool, and different types can be brought and crafted to fit your playstyle. A sturdier one can soak up heavier hits, while a high risk reward version boosts your parry's effectiveness. Pairing has a delicious weightiness to it, and when you nail the timing, it still feels fantastic after the 1000 deflect. Trust me when I say that's a skill you will want to perfect before taking on some of Ragnarok's toughest fights as well. Runic abilities, special cooldowns, attacks assigned in your inventory also return, and while there isn't the same abundance of choice this time around, they lower the amount of runic abilities. Each is devastatingly effective. For example, Hades' Retribution, a fiery stab that lodges a bomb into the ribcage of an enemy, is particularly fun to put into action. Brutal finishers on stun enemies are another enjoyable throwback to the God of War world. Heads are dismembered, waists are left standing and spouting blood, there we go, and torsos are carved in two. There's noticeably a good amount of variety in the randomly chosen weapon-specific animations too, so you won't get bored of seeing that one-head stomp execution move from 2018 over and over again. My favorite has to be the simple pleasure of seeing the shock on a soldier's face as their arms are hacked off one by one. Beautiful. Most importantly, all of these additions give an extra tactical edge as you mix up the cadence of your strikes and control each fight. Kratos is a little lighter on his feet this time around, with a bit less of a thumping clump to his sprint. Movement is further emphasized by the way you can now grapple up from a distance using the blades and launch across gaps to dive into combat. Taller arena design literally adds extra layer to battles, allowing you to leap from a ledge to deliver the death from above. Combat sequences can feel akin to Doom kill boxes as you dash and swing around elevated platforms towards your next victim in performances of acrobatic bloodshed, juggling cooldowns, Atreus arrows, and your rage meter to efficiently and spectacularly destroy everyone sent to stop you. You are required to think on your feet much more and take into account a vastly increased variety of enemy attacks and status effects such as Burn, Frost, Poison, and many more that affect both you and your attackers. Each fight feels like a real occasion as you slalom your way through changed, parryable, and unblockable attacks in order to sneak in a hit or two. Enemies can now perform powerful but interruptible attacks signified by a blue ring above their head in addition to the regular skills. A double tap of the shield will sort this out, but get your timing wrong and you are in line for some considerable pain. Combat really develops over time too, as small wrinkles and bigger game changers are introduced throughout. Environmental strikes such as ripping a jagged tree from the ground before swinging it like an oversized baseball bat are often available to introduce an unfortunate soul's face. So you can take some of the environment and strike people with it. There are plenty of other big additions to combat, but that I won't divulge so as not to ruin the sensation of discovering them yourself. But Ragnarok includes some of the most eye-catchingly colorful magic attacks I've ever seen in a game, beautifully destructive summon abilities, and much more. All are further examples of Santa Monica's seemingly endless pool of creativity. Ragnarok has a myriad more tools in its bag than God of War 2018 ever did, and is all the more enthralling for it. It all feels exceptional when in full flow, often mesmerizing with its top-tier action drenched in rhythmic brutality, and is quite simply the best combat I can remember playing in a game. And that just goes for the regular fights. Boss battles are both a higher quantity and a quality, including one encounter that makes this opening stranger fight from 2018 look like a playground scuffle. Oh my god, that fight was amazing, like for the opening fight, and now you're telling me that's even one that's even better than that? There are definitely some of those huge boss fights that were so much more prevalent in the original trilogy this time around, with creatures regularly of a bigger scale than we saw 4 years ago. A lot of these one-on-one encounters are a true test of your capabilities as well, and even when playing on the give me balance medium difficulty setting, I found myself needing resurrection stones far more than I did in the previous game. It's not just the story bosses either. I fought massive alligator bastards called Reki on more than one occasion, which are a real event to fight and more of a challenge than 2018's trolls ever posed. It's great to see sprinkling of that old school monster mayhem thrown into the mix, which manages to successfully offset some of the more serious stretches of the story. Puzzles offer much of what you would expect, lodging the axe into objects to keep them from moving or freezing them to redirect water flows, burning vines to get elevators working, etc. Smart new puzzle ideas are consistently introduced though, and built in complexity throughout as more abilities are added to your arsenal. They are often fun and never in danger of slowing your progress to the detriment of the plot, but even so, Atreus or Mimir can come in with a hint far too early and sometimes rob you of that satisfying aha. So that's one of the things that I like from that design. That like sometimes you see something that you're gonna be able to open later, and to like you get a skill that allows you to come back and either get a new reward that was hidden or locked or something like that. So there's more of that, but like even the characters themselves kind of spoil it a little bit. It's a very rare annoyance in a world where normally every last word is a joy to listen to. Armor customization has been streamlined, resulting in the removal of the slotting system for a more straightforward upgrading mechanic. Enchantments are now placed inside a separate amulet rather than spread over various pieces of gear. This division makes seeing what you have equipped easier and means you are not lost delving into too many menus within menus. This also means you can upgrade a piece of armor and take it. This also means you can upgrade a piece of armor and take it with you through your journey if your playstyle happens to perfectly click with a certain set, or if you just love how it looks. Remember that it has transmogrification. I found myself changing up my builds regularly throughout. However, as I kept wanting to experiment with all Ragnarok has to offer, the same goes for weaponry, which can be upgraded, as well as fitted with attachments such as individual named heals and handles, each with its own perks and bonuses. Who wouldn't want to play with the Stonecutter's knob after all? Further experimentation is encouraged by the new skill token system, which allows you to add damage, stone elemental, and other boost to any unlocked ability. It really does feel more like you are being encouraged to build your Kratos this time around, rather than playing with a pre-designed action figure straight out of the box. It's not stingy on the availability of resources needed to craft gear, further prompting you to inject your personality into a build at it's an inaccessible level of RPG tinkering without ever becoming overwhelming. Realms Reborn. Realms old and new are regularly a sight to behold, many looking torn from the pages of fairy tales stocked with oversized flora and fauna. There's an extra effort to delve deeper into the mythology this time around, and as someone who is a fan of the Nordic source material, it's a real pleasure to see all of the different interpretations of creatures, people, and places they inhabit brought to life in all manner of delightfully weird ways. The dwarven city of Nidavellir is a welcome rural change of scenery, with its many homes and tunnels that Kratos most amusingly crawl around in. It's at the center of the rocky realm of Svartalfheim, where waterways weave through islets littered with bubbling geysers. There's a real sense that the realm was ripped right out of the Old Norse poetic Edda's home of Iceland. Those geysers are also key to solving many of the puzzles in the regions as you freeze them to create stepping stones and manipulate machinery. Quirks like this help in making each place feel unique. Okay, we're almost finishing this review. Similarly, fun new ideas are introduced in the returning Alfheim, such as reflective crystals that you can ricochet your axe off to open doors, or even use to blindside unwitting opponents in combat. It's a further example of not only each realm looking distinct but also feeling distinct to play in from one another. Every location almost feels like a puzzle box that you are gradually unlocking through a combination of brain and brawn as you make your way through it. There's also plenty to discover, with some realms surprising in their vastness. Exploration is encouraged via boat on the Dwarven Seas or via dog sled across Elven deserts. Once again, Metroidvania elements encourage you to revisit block path at a later date once you own the skill required. These new worlds bring with them dangerous new threats. If there were any faults to be found in 2018's revival, then modest enemy variety will have been one of them. However, there's no such issue in Ragnarok, with its bestiary vastly expanded to accommodate all sizes and shapes of creatures. Familiar foes such as Drogor and elves have made their way across, but this time they are joined by Grimms, which, you guessed it, are pretty Grimms cuddling toad people, and a personal favorite, the Inherjar. I don't know how you pronounce that. Inerger? Sorry if that's not the way. Essie warriors who harness the power of the Bifrost that make a section of your health bar glow before removing that chunk on the next hit. Each forms a part of a whole. There's an engaging but never unfair difficulty curve throughout as you are met with progressively greater threats. Side missions are sometimes spectacles in their own right. Standout favors involve helping giant creatures and in distress, and adventures full of personal revelations throughout the lush jungles of Vanaheim. They are a great source of character development as you learn more about your friends and companions by helping them right past wrongs. Some side quests do just present a pure gameplay challenge over extra stories, however, such as hunting down powerful legendary enemies dotted across the realms of Yggdrasil's roots. Okay, we're in the middle of the review. I thought we were getting to the end. There's no shortage of genuinely those side boss encounters either. While I was perhaps taking them on too early out of eagerness, they were a great test of skill nonetheless. Chipping away at larger health bars is a really satisfying challenge and remarkably well balanced against the standard quick kill nature of the majority of Ragnarok's fight. It's yet another testament to the masterful combat design on display, and yes, there are some absolutely top-of-nails endgame level challenges to rival the Valkyries of 2018, the same that we just read in the GameSpot review. But I'm not going to let you find out. But I'm going to let you find out what those are for yourself. There's a substantial slew of collectibles to clean up, as well with audience ravens. As long as the map is better, I think it doesn't. Like that was one of the pains of the Platinum going after the ravens, with how hard the map was to read. Puzzle chests, artifacts, and much more to find in every corner. There's a ton to be done after the main story has been brought to a close, all of it incredibly moorish and fun to complete. Regardless of their nature, all of the optional content is joyously snackable. They not only flesh out the world of Ragnarok and riff smartly on the mythology, but also serve as valuable father and son time, with the end of the world creeping ever closer. Okay, this one is the end. Ragnarok never once rests on its laurels, throwing new ways to play at you until the very end. Despite having the seemingly endless amount to praise here, I really have barely scratched the surface of what God of War Ragnarok has to offer, and deliberately omitting dozens of secrets and surprises. I wouldn't dare spoil what's to come for anyone booting it up for the first time, but rest assured there are both huge story moments and fresh gameplay additions that live up to and often surpass expectations. Taken all together, much like The Godfather Part 2, God of War Ragnarok delivers not only a chapter that reaches the lofty heights of its predecessor, but leaves it impossible to imagine the series without it. And the final verdict: an enthralling spectacle to behold, and even more exciting one to take the reins off. God of War Ragnarok melts the action and adventure together to create a new unforgettable Norse saga. Impeccable writing, pitch-perfect performances, knockout action. It's a complete work of art from top to bottom, reflecting its core themes. It's everything a sequel should be, respectful of its legendary lineage, but not afraid to take it to exciting new places. God of War Ragnarok is an almighty achievement and creates a new high that makes any of its peers look positively mortal by comparison. And he says, it's a masterpiece. God of War is an almighty achievement that creates a new high that makes many of its peers look mortal by comparison. Okay, so great reviews so far, both the GameSpot and the IGN one. Let's go back to OpenCritic. So we have 112 reviews and it's still remaining at 94. So yeah, I'm still gonna jump into a couple more reviews. I'm gonna jump into like a mid review, like an 8 or a 7, and then some of the negative ones. But first I'm gonna take a quick break. I didn't bring water here because I don't have space to have it without having an accident in here. So quick break and I'll be back.
Came up short today. Feels like I fell 1,000 times. Nothing but doubt to flood my mind. 'Cause sometimes it's hard to remember why I ever started racing with my dreams. A restless December, feeling I was meant for more than I believed. I'll never surrender, rather try and fail and fall 1,000,000 times. I'm on my way. I'm on my way. I know as close as I am now, I will struggle, I will shout. There's no stopping, there's no doubt. I'm on my way. There's no stopping, there's no doubt. I'm on my way. I swear I meant to do this. I'm told that love would never lie. Where my head has met my heart and they are beautifully aligned. But sometimes it's hard to remember everything I've done that's brought me to this space. I started with embers, now a raging fire is burning in its place. I'll never surrender, rather try and fail and fall 1,000,000 times. I'm on my way. I'm on my way. I know as close as I am now, I will struggle, I will shout. came up short today. Feels like I fell 1,000 times. Nothing but doubt to flood my mind. 'Cause sometimes it's hard to remember.
Okay, we're back. We have checked 3 reviews so far. The kind of funny one, and both the IGN one and GameSpot. All 5 out of 5 from IGN, 10 out of 10 from kind of funny, 10 out of 10 from IGN, and GameSpot 10 out of 10. The Open Critic is still at 94 with 112 reviews. Now let's check what people that didn't think the game was a masterpiece mention. Let's see, for example, okay, let's get like a quick look at all the reviews. Eurogamer recommended. Much like its heroes, God of War Ragnarok learns to love itself for what it truly is: gargantuan, excessive, and wonderfully absurd. Games Radar Plus: a beautiful world filled with things to discover and a fitting close for Kratos' Viking adventure that only misses full marks thanks to a light touch opening half that takes a while to hit its stride. Let's see, we have 9, 9.5. Okay, most of them are like 4 out of 5, 10 out of 10, 9, 5, 8.5. I think the lowest so far is like an 8. Yeah, let's go with that 8. I think it was from Metro Game Central. God of War Ragnarok review: a myth of father and son, by David Jenkins. The biggest PS4 and PS5. Oh, sorry about that. The biggest PS4 and PS5 exclusive of the year is finally here, but can Ragnarok live up to the spectacle of the previous God of War? The 2018 God of War deserves to be remembered as one of the greatest franchise reinventions of all time. Despite the subtitle-less name, it was not a reboot, but instead a direct continuation of the story of Kratos, a god of war from ancient Greece who up until that point had been one of gaming's most loathsomely immoral protagonists. The games are almost unplayable nowadays for anyone that is not terminally moody teenager, and yet they had to have existed in order for the new game to happen. They are not unplayable. That's a bit of a okay. They are not unplayable. And for Kratos to embark one of the greatest redemptive journeys that gaming has ever seen. I mean, it does feel weird going to the original games in some ways, but like they're still great. If God of War had been some low-budget indie game, its themes would not have seemed so surprising. But it was a massive budget AAA PlayStation exclusive, and Sony deserves just as much credit for publishing it as Santa Monica Studio for making it. By the end of the game, Kratos was transformed from a heartless monster into not only a loving father, but someone that wanted to seek out and help out other people. You might think that leaves nowhere for the sequel on both PlayStation 5 and 4 to go, but while at the start of this new game Kratos has become overly protective of his son, he's still a good person, well, God, and becomes even better throughout the course of this journey. The character-based storytelling is exceptional on any level, but most especially for such a violent, previously nihilistic action game franchise. Although the above is all true, judging the game as a whole, it's clear it's not quite Although the above is all true, judging the game as a whole, it's clear it's not quite so perfectly formed as its predecessor. The primary problem, oddly, is the plot, which is so vaguely sketched that at times it seems almost non-existent. At the beginning of the game, Kratos and his son Atreus, who has learned his Nordic name is Loki, are merely trying to stay out of everyone's way since their actions in the previous game caused the start of Ragnarok and an end-of-the-world myth that seems to be everywhere in pop culture at the moment. Not only have the duo upset Odin's ex-wife Freya by preventing her son from murdering her, but they have also attracted the attention of Odin and Thor, although at the beginning of the game there's a half-hearted attempt at a truce, which is actually a ruse for Odin to try to convince Atreus. Okay, you're kind of spoiling some stuff here. To fulfill a prophecy where he willingly joins him. The game spends an awful lot of time meditating on the concept of unavoidable fate, which is fine in the context of Nordic beliefs at the time, but is hardly a subject that needs much arguing against in the modern day. It does, however, bring to mind the themes of Terminator 2, and we suspect that film has been a great influence here, given its also violent action experience with an anti-war message. It's debatable how clearly that concept and the one about the perils of seeking vengeance is put across by the conclusion of the story, but the biggest problem with the plot is how formless it is. Odin is not a very proactive adversary, and Kratos and his allies spend an awful lot of time talking about how they don't know what to do or where to go, which becomes increasingly demoralizing when you're already feeling that way as a player. This ends up making everything seem very directionless, with the plot's goals all being very vague until almost the last moment. It's a good job then that all the action is still as much fun as ever. God of War is a third-person action game not dissimilar to other big-name Sony franchises, but this with much more involved combat and only a semi-open world structure. Kratos still has his axe from the last game, but it can now generate ice powers which are more effective against certain enemies. From the start of the game, he can also use his Blades of Chaos from the original trilogy, which generate fire. A third weapon with more vaguely defined wind powers is introduced much later. Again, you're kind of spoiling stuff, like the IGN and GameSpot didn't mention some of the they didn't went into these many details. Like they said that you will get some other stuff. But worryingly about the elemental effects is rarely necessary, and the pause while Kratos switches weapons means you can mix up combos Bayonetta or Devil May Cry style. Yeah, I think the original games were trying to be this. We're trying to be like this. We're trying to be like a Devil May Cry style of game, but like this new series is not. The combat does have more depth to it than before, and there are separate skill trees to unlock for each of the weapons, but much like the story, they are utilized in the most imprudent way possible. Whenever you upgrade a weapon to unlock a new level in the skill tree, you usually have enough experience points to instantly buy them all at once. Even with the first set of abilities, you unlock so many at once it's overwhelming. This is a terrible idea because some of the moves and abilities involve very specific control commands, which is good, but because they take time to learn and you are suddenly bombarded with half a dozen at once, it's very easy to completely forget about them. The game is not especially easy, but on the normal difficulty we're often aware of where we were only ever using a small subset of the abilities available moves, with the game providing no incentive or reminder to do anything else. These issues were present in the original but are exacerbated here because of the multiple weapons. However, Ragnarok does improve on the role-playing elements from the last game, which previously felt like mere inventory busy work. There are still too many special amulets, runes, and other buff-providing items, but they are easy to manage this time around, and if nothing else, there's an auto-equip button. The puzzles have got very stale though, and while a few were quite clever, none are very interesting. with far too many involving freezing gears to keep doors open or working out a way to move a crane so you can swing across a gap. These account for what must be 75% of the game's puzzles, and when you get a bunch of them in a row, which happens more than once, it begins to feel disappointingly uninspired. Although it's even more irritating that whoever your companion is will blurt out the solution just seconds after you start trying to work it out. Okay, that's something that I was mentioning, that like some people were not gonna like, that it has some similarities with the original, like the puzzles and all that. So he kind of didn't like that you still have to do like kind of the same puzzles. And well, we also saw these, like some of the characters will tell you some of the stuff and spoil some of that. It was mentioned in the IGN review as well. Ragnarok's other problem is that the majority of realms you visit are places you have been before. The 9 realms are a big part of Nordic mythology, but most of them were already featured in the first game. So there are a lot of return visits, there are mostly new areas, and there's always an attempt to add something new, such as the puzzles involving bouncing your axe off special gems in the elf realm of Alfheim, but that can prevent the feeling of deja vu. You spend a lot of time in Vanaheim and Svartalfheim, which were not featured in the original, but the former is a fairly stock example of a forest world, and while the latter is the home of the dwarves, the place still manages to look completely deserted even when you are in the capital city. Although there is a variety of different companions, including some substantial playtime as Atreus, who plays surprisingly similarly to Kratos despite his bow, in terms of the world you are exploring, everything feels so empty and lifeless. That was also the case in the previous game, and we are still not sure what the explanation is meant to be within the game's lore. What's especially frustrating about the locations is they all follow the same formula and structure with very little variation in terms of visuals or basic layout. There's one noticeable exception that riffs on Jack and the Beanstalk style iconography, which is easily one of the most interesting sequences of the game, but it's the only diversion like that. The graphics are overall very good, even if the facial animation is beginning to look a bit outdated. But the worlds you explore are disappointingly uninteractive and artificial, whether you can or cannot climb or jump off a cliff often seem arbitrary, with the otherwise unstoppable Kratos often having his progress impeded by a small ledge. I mean, that's video games logic sometimes, and it happens in most of the games. The use of invisible walls often means you can seal round objects you could obviously fit between, all of which begins to recall the feeling of touring a theme park attraction. This impression is reinforced in Svartalfheim in particular, which is full of fences with lots of dwarven mining equipment on the other side, which really does make it feel like you are just walking through a Christmas grotto. Santa Monica Studio has already confirmed this will be the last entry to be based on the Nordic myths, and it's easy to imagine there are multiple reasons for this, not least the fact that was originally a startlingly innovative take on a moribund franchise is quickly starting to feel old hat. Many were upset that this is a cross-gen game, and it's clear everything has been designed for the limitations of the PlayStation 4 with no obvious use of the PS5 power. Beyond that, there's just a lot of very odd design decisions. This extends to even the voice acting, which is very good on a technical level, but has some bizarre choices in terms of accents, as well as noticeable more modern dialogue than the last time, which often feels out of place. Almost every character is very obviously American, and this includes a dwarf that talks like a Southern Belle stereotype of an audience actor who seems to be channeling Steve Buscemi in a mafia role. The only accents that are even remotely Nordic are reserved for nameless cannon fodder enemies The one obvious exception is Mimir, voiced by Scottish actor Alistair Duncan, who we can only assume was being paid for how many times he could utter the word brother in a single game. He's far more annoying than he was in the original. He was not annoying, come on. Again, the game makes things worse by having all those characters keep commenting on it. Despite the flaws, Ragnarok is still a very entertaining game. It's longer than its predecessors, and while, like the last game, the combat and limited range of enemies does start to get old a little before the end. There's a mountain of post-game content that will still have you coming back for more. The end, which naturally we're not going to spoil here, is a little disappointing though, not just because the final battles are slightly underwhelming, but because there's what many will see as a cop-out in terms of the story. Expectations are subverted at numerous points, but the one that at the end feels like at least interesting direction they could have, like the least interesting direction they could have taken things. Ragnarok's greatest success is not the action, the exploration, and certainly not the plot. Instead, it's the relationship between Kratos and Atreus, which is going to resonate strongly with everyone, but especially fathers and sons, or those formed from a troubled family. Everything from the sacrifices necessary to become a parent to the awful inevitability of dealing with a parent whose time may be coming to an end are handled organically in a very relatable manner, despite the fantastical nature of the characters. Questions of forgiveness, guilt, and dealing with loss are channeled throughout the other characters as well, although there are enough inconsistencies with Freya's portrayal that she doesn't seem quite so believable. The gradual thawing of Kratos' personality, his struggle to communicate his love for his son, and Atreus' attempts to both support his father and forge his own path are handled so masterfully. Well, it seems all the stranger that the game could have made such obvious mistakes elsewhere. There's even a successful attempt to humanize Thor and his kin, somewhat in the style of The Last of Us Part 2, which again is impressively subtle in the way it depicts a fractured but still loving family. Okay, action video games always struggle to tell meaningful stories but about normal human emotions, for the simple fact that for the majority of any game you're constantly killing people for things, but here it works. The context of everyone being a god or mythological mythological being helps, but mostly just good writing, good performances, and the willingness to take time out from the action to show how the characters feel and how the events are affecting them, and all without any overlong cutscenes. Ragnarok gets some things wrong, but the things it gets right almost no other action game ever has, and that at least is a godlike achievement. The TLDR is a more flawed experience than its predecessor, with a sense that the formula is already starting to wear thin, but the character-based storytelling with Kratos and his son is handled masterfully well. Pros, excellent combat with plenty of depth, even if the game seems too desperate to hide it from you. Huge game world with mountains of content. Fantastic characterization for the two leads. Cons, the plot is a formless jumble and most of the locations are overfamiliar and lacking in interactivity. Flawed skill trees and repetitive puzzles. And 8 out of 10. Okay, it seems the guy didn't like the puzzles and some of the locations. Some of the things like he mentioned about the previous games, I don't agree with. I still can't say if he's right or not until we play the game. But well, it's not like even with all the criticism, he gave it a good score. So okay. I think that might be the lowest. There was also like an IGN Korea review, but I would like to. Okay, we have 115 reviews. I already checked out an IGN review, so I would like to check another one, and probably a shorter one because I can't read anymore. Let's see. I'm also gonna do like a recap of this, like a quick video, or in the PlayStation News where I like mention like the main thoughts of the most important reviews. Let's go with a very negative one. Hard to find one. I think it's gonna have to be that 6 out of 10 from IGN Korea. Yeah, that's the lowest one. Okay, so we're gonna check that. Oh, okay, I can check that. Let's see, do I have the automatic translation for no? I thought there was an option to read it in English since the recap here in English. Okay, let's read the recap here, and this is probably the last I'm gonna read. The game's core design has not moved an inch since the prequel, and the story seems to be lacking in creativity in comparison. Unlike the well-coordinated experience as a whole like the last time, everything in Ragnarok seems to act like a soulless puppets attached to a series of strings. Although the reskin aspect of a working formula seems to be the safest bet, if we were to find any sort of effort of evolution since the prior title, it wouldn't feel as lackluster from a highly anticipated title to make its grand entrance. This one feels rather like a quickly brewed DLC of the previous title instead. Okay, so a few things here we can see that he mentions and go in line with the previous review from Metro Central. What was the website? He didn't like the story, same as the previous guy, and like there are some people that find it that don't find it well that you have like kind of the same things from the previous game. Like it feels like a very continuistic in that sense. So that's like where the most criticism lies. But like again, many people liked it, and I don't think it feels like a DLC. Like obviously in a sequel there's always gonna be something from the previous game. It remains to be seen how much, and that's the challenge to have that balance into the next game. So overall, great reviews. Again, we have 100. Let's go one more here. 115 reviews. That's a 94 out of 94 overall. That's the same score that the original had, but this one has like 250 reviews total. And yeah, well, can't wait to play this next week. Now, the question is if this is gonna be like Game of the Year. It's certainly gonna get Game of the Year from some websites. And about the Game Awards, it does end like bear in mind it does enter between the cutoff dates, so it's gonna be it's probably gonna get nominated, and it's gonna go up against Elden Ring. I haven't played either of the, like, obviously I haven't played Ragnarok, I haven't played Elden Ring yet, but seeing how many people mentioned that this felt like a better game but built upon the foundations of another one, while Elden Ring kind of, I think Elden Ring has more chances based on like that it may feel like something newer. But still, I need to play both. I wouldn't like make a choice for either. Personally, I would go with God of War. I have more chances of going with God of War Ragnarok as my Game of the Year than Elden Ring, even if after playing it, mostly because this is my kind of game. But yeah, we'll see. I still have to play Elden Ring at some point. Maybe do a streams here on the channel. And yeah. So that's gonna be it for this review roundup. Again, I'm gonna do a recap of some of the and even more reviews with a video that should be up even later today or tomorrow. There's also I'm also working on the news video about the PlayStation VR 2 that is gonna be posted later today. And I'll be back later today to finish God of War 3 as part of the road to Ragnarok here. So yeah, let me know what you think about these reviews. Let me know what you think about the overall score. You guys, most of you guys got it. It was easy to get in the poll. And yeah, let me know what you think about the reviews. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.